All right, for this one, what I'm going to do is go back to a sort of static, manually driven structure here. So I'm going to basically reverse back to when I had the 10, or 5 rather. There we go. Okay, so this was balanced, right? And for the purposes of illustrating the issue for you, I can begin to show you flattening this. Okay, so now here's an interesting way of changing the way the structure is read. Okay, this information on the right, those are read as branches of a tree, which means they're individual packets that are read separately but in tandem. The information can be flattened and restructured to read sequentially. So basically, if I right-click and I hit flatten, and let me kind of make this a little, let me just hide that. So when I flatten that, I'm going to hide the grid too. I'll show you guys how to do this in a moment. But when I flatten that, notice how the list here on the right now doesn't read as branches of a tree. It reads as 0 to however many points I have. In this case, I think it's, how many do I have? 42, right? So it just it goes all the way down to index value 41. Okay. What's that? Right. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't explain that slowly enough. Thank you. Sometimes I go a little too fast. If I do that, slow me down. Okay. So flatten is a modifier on either an input or an output anchor point node thingy. So right-click it, and you can either unflatten it by turning it off, or right-click and hit flatten. Okay. Now, because this is flattened, it changed the reaction of the pattern across the grid. Okay, so notice how now we have modifiers. We have 5 modifiers, and we modified the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and the fifth one. And then every single one of them afterwards is the same value. Let me turn those points back on for you. Now you can see the numbers are reading slightly differently as well. So where we used to have 0, 0, 0 at the bottom, now it has 0 to 5, 6 to 11, so on and so forth across the entire grid structure. That's what flattening does. Why do we do that? Sometimes we do it in order to particularly isolate certain elements. We might flatten the list of cells in order to remove certain ones in an overall sequence versus a packaged sequence, right? So all of this type of delineation depends on you as the designer. Do you guys understand what I meant by that without drawing a diagram? I could draw a diagram. No? All right. Well, hearing no response, that makes me think you don't understand it. So I'll draw a quick diagram. Okay, so you have a grid, right? That grid is indicative of perhaps the curtain wall of a building, right? Within this curtain wall, I could either say this is package A, B, C, and D, which is what we had, right? 0 to 5, 0 to 5, 0 to 5, 0 to 5. If I create a modifier for each of those packages, and I say I want to remove the first and second package, or well, let me make this an odd number. There we go. Okay, so if I make a modifier that says I want to remove the first and second of each package of 5 cells, okay, that's going to be this one and this one. You guys in the back might not be able to see it, but you can come up and see it afterwards. But if I apply that to the whole, or to all the branches of that tree, it's going to remove all of those bottom packets. Versus if I flatten the list, it's going to first read the first 5, and then it's going to apply the pattern to each of those 5 elements. However, if I repeat that data, but I set it to a different interval, meaning like this was the first 1 and 2 of 5 elements. But if I flatten the list and now I have 20 elements, but I say I want it to repeat and I want to have remove, remove, keep, keep, right? That pattern is only 4 elements long. So after that, what it's going to remove is the 5th element, and then it's going to remove the 6th element, and then it's going to skip 2, remove 2, and then skip 2, and then remove 2, and then skip 2, and then remove 2. And what you get is this diagonal across the pattern that you wouldn't have gotten if you limited the modification of the list to just 5 numbers. Making a little bit more sense? Seeing a diagram? Well, let's see what it looks like with circles. Okay, I need to take this pattern and I need to apply it to all of these circles. So here's where that analysis component comes into play. I need to read how many circles there are. Okay, so I can do that through the list under set tab, under the list panel. There's this thing called list length, which is one of my favorite components. I love it because there's nothing more powerful in Grasshopper than being able to read the information that you've created. It's so cool. So anyway, so I'm going to plug in list length here, and for simplicity's sake, I'm going to get rid of some of these panels, make it a little bit simpler to read. So list length, what does it do? It measures the length of a list. Not the length of the components in the list, it just measures the length of the list itself. So it's asking, how many of them are there? Perfect for us. So what I'm trying to read is how many points we have. So if I plug my flattened list of points into the list length, actually it doesn't have to be flattened, but what I'm going to get is, and let me just put a panel on there to make it super obvious, 42. Okay, that list length is reading that there are 42 points for me. And if I need to create 42 of these, and I'm going to move this circle kind of off to the side, because now what I need to do is, and you'll see me do this, I'll like spread open a spot in the workspace, because what I know is I need to change how many radius values I'm giving it, and these are the radius values that I need to modify to repeat. So if I just yank this over and create a little workspace in here, I can work in there and insert something new. So here, back under set and under sequence, we have this one called repeat data. Okay? Repeat data will repeat a pattern until it reaches a certain length. Ringing a bell? Well, we just found the list length, and we're going to use that list length to intelligently inform the list of radius values to make sure that it always corresponds with how many values we have in our grid. So I'll plug the list length into, actually let's read the input values. So this is something you should get used to as you're learning components. Read what it's asking for. First, the D value is asking for the pattern as a list, and then it's asking for the length of the list. That's the L value. So it's going to sort of flip-flop on us here. We're going to put the length of the list in the L for length, and then we're going to put the pattern, which is this, into the D value. So now I'm going to move this panel over and read what the change is. Oops. If I plug this in instead, now you can see that it's creating a long list of repeating values. So index 0 is 0.94, index 5 is 0.94, index 10 is 0.94, right? So it's taking that information and it's just cycling it through again and again and again. How many times? 42 times. Pretty cool, right? What does that mean for us? Let's close the book on this, and I apologize for going fast, but we're kind of running short on time. We take this data now and we plug it into the R, and that's what we get. We get more modified dynamic patterns. And more importantly, I can continue to modify this grid however I see fit. I can change the numbers like this, and I'll get different patterns throughout. I can change how big my maximum value is. That'll make some of them bigger. I can change my seed so that it changes that pattern a little bit more. I'm trying to study your faces to see how amazed you are, because I can't hear it. I can't hear how amazed you are. But this is pretty amazing, right? So I love doing this on the first day, and I know it's really, really long-winded. But it's very, very important to kind of get that experience up front to understand, how we're using information to create something that would take hours to model it in Rhino manually. And then what happens when your design professor comes up to it and says, this pattern's not dense enough, make it more dense. And you're like, ah, crap, I have 1,500 circles that I now need to go back and scale. Scale from the center point, scale, scale, scale. You'll be there for days. Okay, so this is incredibly powerful. And I hope that what I taught you today gave you some appreciation for what the possibilities are in the future. Yeah? All right. No. All right. So there is one more thing that I have to show you. I'm going to stop this video here, and then, yeah, it's just a little bonus thing.